In this lesson, I'm going to walk you through how to create the frequency distribution tables using technology. In this particular video, we're going to look at creating the frequency distribution and the cumulative frequency distribution in Google. In the next video, we'll look at creating the group frequency distribution and the relative frequency distribution in Excel. Even though I'm doing different frequency distributions in two different technologies, the steps are essentially the same. So if you are viewing this, first look at the video that corresponds to your chosen technology, your chosen spreadsheet app. And then when you have practiced with that spreadsheet app and you feel comfortable with it, try viewing the other video but still work in your chosen spreadsheet. The intent is to provide you with the appropriate tools you need, but to also allow you some time and encouragement to practice this on your own. With both of these technologies, we need an add-on package. I have videos posted on how to load those tool packs in both Excel and Google. If you've watched those and you've installed the tool packs, let's see how to get access to them. If you have not watched the videos yet, I encourage you to stop this video and go watch those. Watch the one on your chosen spreadsheet so that you know how to incorporate the tool pack that we'll be using. We'll be using this tool pack off and on throughout this semester, so we'll need it. Go ahead and watch it. If you already have the tool pack installed, in Google, you will find that tool pack up here in the add-ons menu. If I click on add-ons, Excel Minor Analysis Tool Pack is the add-on that we need. So I'm going to click Start so that it loads into my Google Sheet. In this particular lesson, we're going to look at recreating our group frequency distribution and cumulative frequency distribution that we did in the example in our lesson by hand, where we worked with the seconds for the drive-through times. So my data in Google right now consists of those 50 different drive-through service times in seconds. To use Google to create a grouped frequency distribution, we need to tell it what our classes are. And in order to do that, Google wants our upper limits for the classes. We had 5 classes. I'm going to input our upper limits. And then there are a lot of options over here. All of these are different types of statistical applications, tests, charts, tables. There's a lot here. And like I said before, we are going to be using some of them. To find this group frequency distribution, we're going to come over to the tool pack and find the histogram. When we click on the histogram, we see some boxes. The input range is going to be our data. The bin range, this is our upper limits. So we need to tell it where our upper limits are sitting. If we have labels on our upper limits, we can click that we have also selected the labels. We're not going to do that right now. I prefer just to change the chart when it's done. Our output range is where we want the spreadsheet app to put our table in our spreadsheet. When we select the output range, the spreadsheet will insert the table to the right and down of where we've selected. So we usually just select one cell and then know that to the right and down of that cell we'll have other table values. And then there's some other things down here that we're not going to look at just yet. So for input range, we can either type it in or select it. I'm going to select the data. I'll hold down and scroll over, except Google's a little finicky when it comes to this tool pack. It doesn't like to scroll over if you have data underneath that tool pack menu. So I'm going to go to the far side and select starting with J and going over. So I've selected my data and now I'm going to click in that input range box and notice that it inputs my selection. Excel is just a little bit different in that we click the input box and then we select our data and it updates it. It's a little different, but like I said, if you're working with Excel, hopefully this is the second video you're watching in order to get Excel to work for you. So you've already experienced how Excel will take the data. And then the bin range, I don't want that bin range, I want this bin range. Bin range is just the upper limits of my classes. So I've got A8 to A12, I'm not selecting a label. And then I'll come over here and select an output range. We'll start with C8. And if I click OK, it creates my table for me. And there we have our frequency distribution. We just need to clean it up a little bit. The spreadsheet gives us a more column, a more class, and this is for those open-ended distributions if we were to have them. We don't, so I'm going to delete that. We're cleaning up the table now. The technology has created it, but we need to dress it up a little bit. Bin, that's not what we call these. We usually call these classes or time in seconds. I'm going to call mine time in seconds. And we still have frequency. Frequency is okay. But here, our classes are ranges of values. The technology can't really handle ranges, and so we need to correct it. So I'll come up here to the editing. I'm going to click in my function toolbar, and I'll put in all my lower limits with a little dash between them, pretty much so that it looks like my table by hand. We need a title for our table. And there we have our frequency distribution. We could make things bold here, center it, all of the fancy things that put bells and whistles on. I'm going to merge the cells so that it's centered over the whole table. I'm going to make it a slightly different color so it can be identified a little bit differently away from the data. And there we have our grouped frequency distribution. To do our cumulative frequency distribution, I'm going to do it underneath just for convenience. For our cumulative frequency, I'm still going to keep the title. This time I'm going to call this cumulative frequency. And this table we're going to do pretty much with our power, more so than Excel or Google. We're not going to use any built-in functions because there are none. But we are going to make use of some power that actually the spreadsheets do have. So first let's set up our table. We've got our classes, time in seconds. In our cumulative frequency distribution, our classes are now less than the next lower limit. So our first class is 83 to 128. So our first class in the cumulative frequency will be less than 129. You could also write this as less than 128.5, but that can get a little awkward since all of these are whole numbers anyways. We'll use the next lower limit for the less than part. So less than 175, less than 221, less than 267, and less than 313. So we have our 5 classes, and now we need to calculate our cumulative frequency. So we're going to take advantage of the power of our spreadsheet. And again, this works in both Google and Excel. So I'm going to start out with an equal sign, and I'm going to grab the very first value in my grouped frequency distribution, 13. So I just clicked on it and I hit enter, and it copies it over. What makes this nice is that if something were to happen and I add a data set and I have to change it, notice it automatically changes down here. It automatically updates. That's pretty awesome. I'm going to change this back. I get back to 13. For the next value in our cumulative frequency, I'm going to use equal sign again. I'm going to take 13 and I'm going to add to it the 22. So I'm adding the next value in my table. And if I hit enter, I get 35. That's exactly what we had before. And then for less than 221, I would hit the equal sign again, click on 35, add 10, and I could do that for the rest of them. But there's an easier way. Know that you can do that. You can step through each one of these cells and put in equals previous value plus table value equals previous value plus table value. I'm not going to do that though. I'm going to clear out that 45. Starting up here with the 35, again, I'm going to use the power of the spreadsheet program. With the 35, notice how my mouse is an arrow, and if I move it around, that arrow changes shape. It's now a hand, and that hand says I can grab it and move it around. In Excel, it's a little bit different, but the idea is the same. If I come over here to this little blue square in the bottom right corner, notice how my mouse changes from a pointer to a plus sign. This little blue square is called a handle. So I'm going to grab the handle, click and hold my mouse button, and drag this down. Now you don't see this very easily, unfortunately, but there is a slightly darker gray outline that's going around the cells that I'm moving through. When I go all the way down to the bottom and I release my finger from the mouse, I get the values in my cumulative frequency distribution table that I did by hand. Okay, what's going on? So up here, when I have this formula where I'm referencing the cells, I cannot type the actual numbers in because the numbers don't make this happen. It's the cell references that make this happen. So I have D17 for that 13 value and D10 for 22. In the next cell, where 45 is, notice I have D18 plus D11. The spreadsheet app noticed that the new cell directly underneath where I put the formula is exactly one down. So it shifts the formula by 1 in the direction that I pulled down on the handle. So since I pulled down on the handle, it shifted each one of these formulas by 1 in the new cells that it copied it into. And that's ultimately how I got all the values that I wanted. It knew to move down the cell references. When we get to other places where we don't want that to happen, there is a way where you can lock the reference so that it does not migrate with your moving of the handle to copy over the formula. You can essentially do the exact same value in every formula that you're copying over. We'll actually get to see that when we do the relative frequency distribution in the Excel video. So I will be using a locked cell reference in that video to show you the difference. Then here's our cumulative frequency drive-through service times for our data. We can make it a slightly different color just to call it out. I could make the word frequency a little bit more inside the cell to make it a little bit neater. But there are our two tables. Next up in this series, we'll look at creating the associated graphs to these tables.